I'm talking with Ben Powell, and Ben is the Extension Apiculture and Pollinator Specialist. And we've been with all the things we hear about the problems that bees and pollinators have. We're so glad that there's somebody who's specifically designated to help get the information out of what we as citizens can do to do our part. And you said there's a plant that you particularly enjoy that people often don't think of as being important in that pollinating, feeding world.
Yes. It's funny, Amanda. We've been doing these Zoom meetings, these online meetings, and our team of horticulture agents has met regularly. And one of the questions the team posed to everybody was, what's your favorite plant? And I piped up and said, the hollies. And there was a kind of a round of chuckles that went through the crowd. Well, yeah, everybody's like, that's, it's just a foundation plant. What's special about hollies? But they are actually some of my favorites.
Well, and I guess we feel that way because hollies aren't known for great, big, beautiful flowers.
Right. But they're very important flowers.
And hollies have male flowers and female flowers. And so let's talk about why those kind of small flowers are important and what's important about the male flower and what's important about the female flower.
Sure. So hollies are a very diverse group of plants. There's like 500 species worldwide, and I think North America has about half of those.
Woo.
So we actually get to see what they can do on a regular basis. And the good news is we have a lot of options for landscaping as well. The holly flower is not a very big, showy flower for us. But if you were a bee, it's the best thing ever.
Come on.
Highly nutritious, has a lot of nectar volume to it, as well as pollen. And when holly trees are in bloom, you will see just about every kind of pollinator in your area working those trees.
So if you're somebody who likes to look at pollinators and or photograph them, a holly is going to it's like having a whole lot of channels on your cable almost.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I was just looking at some East Palatka hollies that I just planted last fall, and they're only about 8 feet tall right now. They are so full of blooms that it was so much activity with bees and flies and butterflies and so many different insects that, my kids were like, can I even go out there, Dad? It's a whole lot of stuff flying around over there. It's like, man, they're foraging. They're not going to hurt you right now.
Yeah, they're much more interested in getting something to eat. Why is both pollen and nectar important? How is it used?
Sure. So honeybees are relatively unique in that they collect and store nectar, which is the carbohydrate, the sugar source. And so hollies are good for that. And so you will definitely find honeybees working that. But most of our native pollinators, the solitary pollinators, what they're really most focused on is the pollen. For folks that are interested in protecting pollinators, they need to think about vertical planting. And what I mean by that is most of us don't have huge yards. We don't have 1,000-acre forest to manage or 100-acre farm field. We've got a tenth or a half an acre in our backyard, and we're looking for things that help pollinators and insects, but we don't have a lot of room. Mm-hmm. Well, things like an American holly give you vertical growth with lots of blossoms, so that you don't take up a lot of space like you would with like a wildflower meadow.
Okay. Right. Very good.
Because honeybees, they have to visit 2 million blossoms to produce 1 pound of honey.
Whoa.
So that's a lot of flowers.
That is. So, and the holly has very nectar-rich flowers.
Yes.
So that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
And if you can grow a tall plant that has lots of flowers on it, you don't take up so much space, then you've done a really good thing for honeybees and pollinators.
Well, now we have some deciduous hollies, and they sometimes have a feature in that their berries are more prominently displayed in the winter. I guess they would be just as good for the pollinators, wouldn't they?
Oh, they sure are. They bloom just as prolifically. One that comes to mind is the winterberry.
Uh-huh.
It's a beautiful kind of mid-story shrub. It likes field edge habitats where it gets a little bit of sun, a little bit of shade. But when it gets the right habitat, it can be just loaded with large, bright red berries right in the middle of the wintertime when everything else is just dull and drab.
Yeah, and I got to go on a nature weekend once and down towards the coast, and there were these kind of inconsequential looking hollies, Ilex glabra or inkberry holly, or apparently sometimes even gallberry holly. And the flowers, I could barely see them, but I went up and watched them for a while, and they were super, super busy with pollinators. And I understand that the gallberry honey is even considered kind of a real special kind. So, but the inkberry was so loose, but I've heard that they've been doing some work to try to get it more compact so that we could maybe use it as a foundation plant instead of boxwoods.
Right. So for the folks that live in the low country, you can go into some of the old forested habitat, especially where they do controlled burning. And the understory can be a large blanket of these little low growing hollies. And it's a very unique holly because it actually has a black berry. And this is the gallberry or inkberry holly that we're referred to. And it largely is overlooked because it's not really a very showy, flashy plant. But for a pollinator, having a huge field of flowers that are intense nectar producers for a very short period of time is it's heaven. So you can go into some of these managed forests in the coast plain and find these plants and just find every pollinator you can imagine working them. The problem is it's not really one we think of using in a landscape scenario. Because like you said, it's loose. It doesn't have a whole lot of foliage compared to the amount of stem. It's got blackberries instead of the red berries.
Yeah.
But there's been some work. And you tuned me into this a little bit. And I think you can find some that are much more attractive for foundation plantings and might even be able to replace things like boxwoods.
Wow, that'd be good because boxwood's not much used to our pollinators, and this would be. And with the boxwood blight, we would be removing that worry from our yard.
Sure, and at least you get a berry out of this one too. A little more, interest.
Yeah, and I bet by the end, I think holly berries aren't super attractive to birds, but at the end of the season don't you think at the end of the season when they're really hungry, they say, oh, heck, I'm just going to go ahead and eat my spinach like I'm supposed to.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, I think there are a few birds that do kind of specialize on them. Things like cedar waxwings, I believe they are attracted to holly berries. And so I think, having that extra food source is definitely going to attract some desirable wildlife.
Well, I think that's fun, and I'll end by telling you a story that perhaps you'll find interesting. My mother grew up in Old Ellington, where the bomb plant is now, down at Riverside. And back then, they didn't get cedar trees for Christmas. They would go out and get a female Native American holly because they wanted to bring those beautiful berries in and have that as part of the decorations.
Sure. Well, and the great news is with hollies, there's been so much interest over such a long time. We have so many cultivars that we can use. Burford hollies and Foster hollies and hybrids and crosses that give us all these different shapes and sizes and features. There's pretty much a holly for just about every purpose.
Well, it sounds like there certainly is from the insect world, and I want to thank you for sharing this information with us today.
You're welcome.